Hey, everybody, I'm Blake Morgan, and you are watching the Modern Customer Podcast. Today, my guest is Joe Hart, the CEO of Dale Carnegie Training. Dale Carnegie was started over 100 years ago. They today have over 3,000 consultants. Their client list includes 400 of the Fortune Global 500, tens of thousands of small to medium-sized organizations, and over 8 million individuals across the globe. Today in the podcast, we're talking about how to manage in times of change and what kind of mindset you need to embrace the new technological world, and how you can not just be a better performer, but a better manager of people and create that culture that you want. Please enjoy Joe Hart. Hey, Joe, welcome to the Modern Customer Podcast. How is the weather today in Detroit, where you're calling in from?
Yeah, actually, it's nice to have a little sun today. Michigan is not the best place to be this time of the year, but sunny and I don't know, high 30s.
Yeah,
And
that
what
sounds
what about
good.
yourself, Blake? You're in
I don't
California?
want to tell you because you might be jealous, but I am outside of LA, so our cold is like, I think it's a high of 62 today. But I did live in New York for 5 years, and I remember if you forgot your gloves, your fingers were just like ice.
Yep.
But Michigan is so beautiful. You have all these lakes there. I mean, is there a lot that you love about living there? I hope so, because you do live there.
Yeah, well, actually, the number one thing is family. We've got we got two of my daughters who live here. My mother's here, my mother-in-law. So that's great. But a lot of nature near where we are. It's a very pretty state, and I love being outside. And there's just a lot to do. Nice community. We live in a really nice town. So yeah, it's a great place to be. I won't kid you. We were in New York for a while, and we lived there up until a couple of years ago. And I miss parts of that. New York's a great place to be as well. But it's nice to be here.
Yeah, Michigan is so beautiful. And if you love nature, that's the place to be. And during COVID, we also moved to be near family. That's why we live here, to be near grandma and grandpa. So family for me is also number one. And I mean, Michigan is so beautiful. But let's talk about your career and how you came to be at Dale Carnegie, and a little bit about what Dale Carnegie is for those that might live under a rock and not have heard of it. But how did you get your start? I understand you were a lawyer and now you're CEO. How did that happen?
Yeah, it's a really circuitous kind of career path. Some people, Blake, are like kind of linear. They go to a certain level. I started as a lawyer. Always thought I wanted to be a lawyer. Went right from college to law school to a large firm, and at a very early stage in my career, I took a Dale Carnegie course, and part of what that course did was it really challenged me around my vision around, what do I want to do for the rest of my life? And am I really aligned to the values that I have? And as much as I was a successful lawyer on a partner track at a great law firm, I wasn't necessarily happy. So I ultimately made the decision to leave the practice of law. And by the way, you're asking about Dale Carnegie. I mean, this is a program that's been around since 1912. It is all over the world. We have 200 operations in 86 countries. But a big part of this for me was just even becoming more effective at human relations. As a young lawyer, I wasn't, I don't know, Blake, super empathetic, maybe a little bit arrogant, but I started to apply the things that they were teaching in this program, and I really started to develop stronger relationships. And so I went from law to business and really accelerated in my career. Ultimately, I left and started an e-learning company at a time when e-learning wasn't really a huge thing. This is the early 2000s. Dale
Mm-hmm.
Carnegie became my first client. We developed programs for Dale Carnegie around the world. Ultimately built and sold that company, became the president of another company. And then in 2015, when the CEO of Dale Carnegie retired, I was invited to go into the recruiting process, which was pretty rigorous. But this is a company that changed my life. All 6 of my kids have taken our programs. My wife took our programs. So it's something that's had a huge impact on me. And it's a true honor to be able to lead this global company.
Dale Carnegie, when we think about that name, I mean, there is this huge legacy. Now, I think the difference than when it was started is obviously just incredible change in society and technology and how we live, work, and play. What are some of the big things that your clients are asking for now when we think about training and professional development?
Yeah, it's interesting. There are some, and you're totally right. I mean, there's some constants and some things that have been constant in terms of, say, how do we present more effectively? How do I connect with people? How do I develop stronger relationships? And at the same time, the world has changed so much, and most of our clients are large companies or companies of really various sizes, but they're dealing with how do we create high performing teams? How do we deal with the culture that we need to move forward in an era of AI? There's a lot of uncertainty, and some people are concerned, some people are excited, but how do we really integrate technology into our business in a way that people will adopt? How do we help people connect at a stronger emotional and creative and social level? Because at the end of the day, it's still people, it's connections. How do we work together? So a lot that we're doing, we're extremely busy right now. We've come out of COVID very, very strong. And I'd say in many ways, the world probably has never needed Dale Carnegie more than it does today.
Yeah, because with technology, I think it can be stressful for employees. It's exciting, but my audience, a lot of people watching and listening are in the contact center space and customer experience. And so we're training employees on AI that could potentially take their jobs. Is AI going to take their job? Well, we don't know. It depends on the strategy of the company, but I think there's probably a lot of emotion. Let's talk about your training program. Could you just give us a high level view of what the course or what the general staples are of what you offer for each course?
Yeah, well, so the main course, if you think about Dale Carnegie, the flagship course, if you will, is called the Dale Carnegie course, and it deals with self confidence, interpersonal skills, communication, leadership, and managing stress and worry. So you think about the person in the call center, and really even how do we frame things? How do we see things? Part of what Dale Carnegie knew is you could have two people in the exact same position. One person sees opportunity, the other person sees crisis. So how can I be the person who sees opportunity, drives change, has an impact, grows in his or her career? And that's what a lot of the Dale Carnegie course is really about, is how do we have the right attitude, the right mindset? How do we see opportunity? How do I have the skills so that I can interact with people? Because we know, Blake, right, the most successful people are often those who are really good with other people. They can influence, they can lead, and they can present their ideas effectively. And at the same time, the world maybe has never been more dynamic, chaotic as it seems right now. So there's a stress factor. Social media adds to that stress. You're happy in one moment, you look at something else and something that's happening, all of a sudden it affects your mood. And we know that people can get depressed and lonely and isolated. So the Dale Carnegie course really is about helping people deal with some of those things, strengthen their emotional intelligence, and be more effective in all that they do.
Yeah, you're talking about the growth mindset. Like AI could be brought into a company. One person feels concerned, scared. The other one might be interested, curious. What is the difference between what the interested, curious person is telling themselves versus the one that is afraid?
Yeah, it's a great question. The person who's afraid says, it's a woe is me. It's like, oh, this is coming. There's nothing I can do. What am I going to do? This is going to be horrible. So those are the kinds of things that they might be thinking about. The other person might be saying, where's the opportunity here? What if I could become really good at leveraging AI? What if I could actually interact with AI to find in what ways could I develop myself and the skills? Hey, ChatGPT, what are the skills that will really be important in the years ahead? So I might use this or leverage this. Or many times people will look at, say, ChatGPT. Everyone knows that that's the number one most used form of AI. But what are the other things that are out there? How do I educate myself so that I can become more proficient? The number two most popular site is called character.ai. And there's how do I become more familiar with some of the things that are out there? So the person who has the right mindset is going to be proactive. They're going to be able to control their emotions, control their fear. I mean, not that they're might not be afraid. They might have fears. That's natural. And they're going to be able to be constructive in terms of what they do. So they'll look for the opportunities really to take advantage of what the world presents to them.
So I think what's interesting about Dale Carnegie is when he started this business, the cult of personality was starting to become a thing where you had salespeople and door-to-door salespeople. Like if you think about like the 50s and that era. Now, like you said, there's a lot coming at us all the time. It's a completely different world. And as far as even culturally, socially, it's more difficult to navigate. it's not always clear how to be, what to say, what is appropriate, what is not appropriate at work. What advice do you have for employees that not only are they challenged with these new technologies, but it's just a more complicated, like you said, dynamic workplace environment? What advice do you have for them to basically just be okay at work without kind of saying the wrong thing or being afraid of being canceled or offending people? What advice do you have for them?
Well, I mean, what you described is really true. Things are complicated and they're shifting very quickly, and something that maybe was true yesterday isn't true tomorrow. So, the best investment I have then is in myself. How do I learn how to equip myself to handle it? I'm holding up, we have a golden book. These are all the different principles that Dale Carnegie teaches in how to stop worrying and start living and how to win friends and influence people. And so, part of it is, to your question, hey, how do I know what to say and what not to say? Some of the things that we teach are really about how do you interact with people effectively. That might mean listening to people. How do I listen? How do I ask good questions? How do I try to see things from their point of view? How do I talk in terms of their interests? Do I give honest and sincere appreciation? Do I respect people? If I have a difficult situation, do I begin in a friendly way, or do I just come and really start hitting people hard? So when I learn the skills about how to really deal with people effectively, I then learn the confidence. I gain confidence. It's like, okay, I trust my ability to work effectively in any situation. But that really takes time. It's not dissimilar to working out, right? So if I go to the gym and I lift some dumbbells and I do some hammer curls one time and then I leave, I'm like, okay, that was good, but that's not going to get me strong or more muscular. There are things I need to do and to practice over time. And human relations are the same thing. Developing our emotional intelligence is the same thing. Learning how to be a better conversationalist. So there are skills that we can develop and practice. And when we do those things, Blake, I mean, it makes us better. It's the investment in ourselves. So I continue to grow in my life and my career, my relationships, and in my success. But those are some of the things I would say. Constantly be learning, constantly be reading. Take a Dale Carnegie course, read How to Win Friends and Influence People, practice those skills. And those kind of investments are the kinds of things that really pay off.
Many of our listeners and viewers, Joe, are contact center managers. They are managing a lot of people. The contact center historically has very high turnover, so you might need to onboard and train people all the time. Winning friends and influencing people is important for managers, you can argue as well. What kinds of tips do you have for managers that need to be respected, professional? Their team, it's not that you want your team to be afraid of you, but they have to respect you and listen to you, but you also need them to like you. It's a very difficult balance. How can a manager do a better job at that?
Yeah, it really is a difficult balance because, we think about wanting to be effective. We've got to get results. So we've got to hold people accountable for results. And yet we want to be able to do that in a way that, some people can just be really aggressive and assertive and direct. So the number one rule of thumb I would always have is we talk about principle 17, which is from How to Win Friends and Influence People, is to try honestly to see things from another person's point of view. So if I'm a manager and I can recall the time that I wasn't a manager, and let me give an example, Blake. I mean, I remember as a lawyer, okay, as a young lawyer, I made a mistake. It wasn't it wasn't a huge mistake, but it was a mistake, and I made it. And this partner called me into his office and he just reamed me out. I mean, to the point where I remember this like decades later. It's like, it was like, no one had talked to me that way before. That's one approach. That didn't bring the best out of me. Now, what if he instead had said, hey, Joe, I know you made a mistake here. Look, we all make mistakes. I've made mistakes. In fact, I remember a mistake I made early in my career. Let's walk through what happened here. And you could walk through that. What did you learn from this? What might you do differently to make sure this never happens again? So in the second kind of case, I'm engaging somebody. I am treating them with respect. I'm listening to them. I'm letting them come up with the answers. So two very different approaches. But for the manager in a call center, what can be hard too, sometimes we're promoted, right? We do a really, really good job in a job. And then they say, okay, you're now a manager, but I don't have the skills. No one's taught me how to lead. They've taught me how to be a manager. So, part of my advice would be access whatever resources you can. I mean, certainly Dale Carnegie has fabulous resources, Dale Carnegie courses, leadership courses, books. there's a lot of other things that are out there too, but you got to invest in yourself. And those are some things I would do to recommend, really strengthening that kind of managerial and leadership muscle, because we've all got the opportunity to lead.
Something that's interesting, Joe, is that in the past, all of these principles that you talk about, they were all in person or maybe on the phone, maybe in handwritten letters in the old days. Now it's social media, it's text, it's WhatsApp, it's Zoom, it's a whole new world of channels. And so these principles have to translate into the technology medium, communicating over technology, building relationships over technology. Is that something that comes up a lot that you guys talk about? And what tips do you have to just do a great job at building relationships through technology?
Yeah, so the same principles apply. I mean, sometimes we think that they don't, right? Because I'm typing something, I'm sending a text, I'm putting something on social media, and so I don't see people. I don't see the interaction that you and I have. If I say something and you respond a certain way, so the number one tip, whether it's on social media or in person, yeah, is to, before you send something or say something, really think about what it is you're saying and how you think it's going to be responded, and how would you feel if someone said that to you, right? One of the most important leadership traits is empathy, and empathy really means I understand kind of where you are. I can. It's not sympathy. It's not kind of feeling sorry. It's I understand. So if I were the recipient of the message that someone was going to send, how would I feel? How would I say it? Would I say use certain words? And this is why social media, and I mean I love Twitter. I go on Twitter quite a bit. You know, but any of these things, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, they could be toxic because people will
Hmm.
just say things. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, but how do you want to, are you building connection? And some people don't care, I suppose, but then that's kind of what they're going to get, what they're going to get in terms of their ability to build relationships with people.
So one of the things that I'm thinking about as I'm talking to you is the book, or Dale Carnegie's teachings, his books. I remember my dad introduced me to them when I was a kid, and he always used to say, and I hope I'm quoting this right, but if you want to win an argument, tell a story. Does that resonate?
I think it does resonate. Yeah. And what I think it's kind of combining a couple of different ideas that Dale Carnegie has. But it does resonate.
All right. So the point is that a lot of our listeners are up against lack of resources in the contact center, because traditionally most businesses view customer service as a cost center. So they're fighting for resources. They don't have an accounting background. They're not able to prove how customer service adds value to the business in a very black and white kind of way. And what contact center leaders need to do a better job of, I believe, is advocating, storytelling, and painting the picture of why the company should invest in customer relationships. Do you have any storytelling tips, or even as a lawyer, how to advocate for yourself, your group, your project? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny about stories because as soon as someone starts to tell a story, hey, Blake, there I was. It was 2 o'clock yesterday, and here's what happened. All of a sudden, we start to pay attention. So
Right.
to your first point about the way to avoid an argument is telling a story. Really, the way to connect with people could be telling a story, and third party stories can be very effective and very persuasive because it might be a way of my telling you something without telling you something, if so to speak. I mean, I could say, hey, Blake, here's what you need to do. You need to do this, 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 and this, and this. What we teach in Dale Carnegie is, you have a story, and then you have, the action I want you to take and the benefit. We call it the magic formula. So if I'm talking to a manager and I'm telling a story about something, that's going to kind of make the point and say, hey, but if we do this, we're going to get this. So you can do that very effectively as a way to connect with people. But the other thing is, I think sometimes when we're trying to persuade, we lead with our opinion, and we teach people about how to disagree agreeably, right? So you can say almost anything if you know how to connect with someone, but lead with the facts, lead with the information, and then kind of come to the conclusion. So if I'm in a call center and I think, give me an example, Blake, of something that might happen in the call center that someone might want to persuade a manager about.
Let's say a
What would
customer
be some?
call. Yeah, a customer calls and they want to do something that is not on the menu. They're asking for something that generally, the contact center wouldn't allow for. So the employee or the manager needs to escalate and ask for an exception to the rule. So they want to
Okay.
advocate for their customer. How do they do that?
Yeah. So what they could say is something to the effect of, let's say you're the manager or I want to advocate. I would say, first of all, Dale Carnegie talks about to talk in terms of the other person's interests. So what does the manager care about? The manager cares about maybe the response time, the satisfaction. I'm not sure
Mm-hmm.
what all the metrics would be, but those
Yeah.
would probably be a couple of them. So if I were to come to you and say, Blake, I've been thinking about something. The last 5 customers that I've talked with, and by the way, and I'm thinking about you first. And Blake, you care. I know you care about the call center and the job that we're doing. You want to make sure we get the best customer satisfaction that we possibly can. And of course, you're going to be saying, yes, I do. Yes, of course I do. I've noticed in the last 5 cases where someone is called and I've been able to solve their problems, we've gotten a much better rankings and so forth, or ratings from those customers than in cases where we simply just tell them what the facts are. So in this particular case, I think if I can help solve this customer's problem, we're going to get better ratings, and it's going to help all of us, and whatever the case might be. But you start by, what does my manager care about? Talk in terms of their interests. I'm going to talk about kind of not just my opinion, but the evidence that then leads to the conclusion. And that can be a very, very effective way of engaging people, as opposed to saying, "Hey, Blake, I think if we do this." Okay, well, you may disagree. So your first thinking is, I don't think that's the right way to do that. So if you lead with the evidence, we say evidence defeats doubt, right? So that's always something that can be valuable.
Yeah, and the lack of emotionality too. It seems like if you lead with the facts, it seems like at work, if people get emotional, the other person probably shuts down. So if you take the emotions out of it too, that actually, I think, can help you as well.
Oh, totally. I mean, you're right, because people can be very defensive, right? I mean, so sometimes if I feel that someone's coming at me or is personally challenged, I emotionally, and Dale Carnegie would say this, hey, remember, people are creatures of emotion, not logic sometimes. So I've got to be sensitive to how I approach someone. If I make you feel defensive, if I put you on the spot, make you think like, you don't know what you're doing. But if I start with, kind of a rationale and then lead to this, and again, you're not feeling threatened if I'm just telling you what my observations are.
Right, absolutely. I think that's so key. Do you have any closing remarks about the type of culture that you think that companies would be successful with today, considering what we've talked about, technology, AI, social media? What types of closing remarks would you have for our listeners on how to create a really successful culture that makes people the best they can be?
So I'll suggest this, and I will challenge each of your viewers, listeners to this, because I think this applies on an individual level and it applies like on a cultural level. And it really comes down to appreciation. The reality is that people are often working very, very hard. And think about yourself, right? If you do something, you're working really hard and you're appreciated, someone recognizes you, gives honest and sincere appreciation versus not at all. How do I
Mhm.
feel if I've worked really hard and someone doesn't say anything? I worked for a job, Blake, one time where they said, hey, your compliment is the absence of criticism. If you're not being criticized, consider that your compliment. That's not great, But on the other hand, if I give honest and sincere appreciation, I say, Blake, and I really noticed you've been working super hard lately. You've handled this kind of volume over this period of time. I know that this has been stressful. I know that a lot of times you're getting these calls and people aren't always, super friendly. So thank you for that. I really appreciate all that you're doing. You're doing a great job. If I can give honest and sincere and specific appreciation. So the challenge I'd also throw down to your listeners, your viewers, is who in our lives right now. It could be a personal relationship, could be someone in our families, could be someone in our office. But try this. Pick a person and give them honest and sincere appreciation. Someone who you haven't done that for in a while, and just see what happens. Because in a culture where we start to do that, it's just really powerful. But again, it's got to be honest, it's got to be sincere, it's got to be from the heart, and that is a really important part of building a strong culture and strong relationships with people.
I think that really resonates. And it just reminds me even of learning to be a speaker, doing Toastmasters, and the kind of, environment we'd create to get people brave enough to speak, there was a lot of applause and positive reinforcement. And you just can't lose to make people feel good. Not to bring up the name of a competitor, but I feel like Toastmasters, it's all,
No,
cool.
it's a great organization. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, let's wrap by getting to know you a little bit better, Joe. Are you ready to take some rapid fire, fast response questions?
I'll do my best. I've got no idea what you're going to hit me with, but I'll do my
Good.
best.
All right, Joe, what is the most important part of your morning routine?
The very first thing I do when I wake up, I've had a morning routine. I spend about 30 to 45 minutes reflecting on the prior day, what went well, what did not, what am I grateful for. I meditate, I pray, I focus on the day ahead. So I've done that religiously, no pun intended, for decades.
Awesome. Well, in contrast, what do you do to relax at the end of a hectic day?
I have you started by talking about Michigan, and I live not too far from a beautiful area of trails. And I have a German Shepherd Husky dog. He's 90 pounds. He's 2 years old. He's energetic, and I take him out on long walks. So that's always a lot of fun.
That sounds awesome. What TV show are you currently streaming?
Well, I watch typically Netflix or Amazon Prime if I'm watching something. Reacher is one that I was watching, and also The Chosen.
Okay. What's your idea of perfect happiness?
By the way, those are two completely different kinds of things. But, uh, I tell my kids a lot of happiness comes from gratitude. And a lot of times throughout the day, I will just stop and I will think about the things for which I'm grateful. And I have just innumerable things. It's hard to be grateful and unhappy at the same time. So for me, happiness focuses on or is really built on just taking stock of all the things I've got to be grateful for. And I can do that anytime. And by the way, I'll just I have this with my kids. I'll say, what are you grateful for? And they'll say nothing. And I'll be like, okay,
Yeah.
well, I could give you 10 things that you could be grateful for. Kind of that repetition. I'm not sure they appreciate it, Blake, but it's something I think they will as they get older.
Absolutely. And if you could have lunch with anybody dead or alive, who would it be?
I would say Dale Carnegie would be someone I'd love to have lunch with. Gosh, probably a lot of
I
people.
think that's a perfect
But
answer.
yeah,
I love that. And lastly, if you had to describe your outlook in one quick motto, what would it be?
the best is yet to come.
Oh, I love that. So
Like,
positive.
yeah, I really feel like, but I want to be clear too. It's not a toxic positivity. I just believe that if we keep on thinking about where the opportunity is, we can find it. And my life has been a story of the best is yet to come. So
That's wonderful. I love that. And if our listeners and viewers want to learn more about the courses you offer, where can they do that?
best place is dalecarnegie.com. And I'd also say too, I'm very active on LinkedIn, Twitter, social media. So it's at Joseph K. Hart if they want to follow me. And we also have a book that I've co-authored called Take Command, and they can go to takecommand.com if they want information about that.
Well, this has been so fun. I really have enjoyed talking with you. I hope you'll come back, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Blake. It's great talking with you.
Everybody, you've been tuning into the Modern Customer Podcast. Until next time. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on social media, including LinkedIn, Instagram, and X.